Hey everyone, it's Katie from Chords Records. Before I start, if I could ask you to like this video if you enjoy it and subscribe, I'd appreciate it. This is going to be quite short. I just want to talk about an album which I received just in the last couple of weeks, or a double album. It's the next in the archive series of Split Enz. It's the next release. It's the latest release on vinyl. It's called ENZyclopedia Volumes 1 and 2 Appendices, and the appendices are Second Thoughts and Wide Angle Lens. So to start off with, I'll just take a step back and explain what ENZyclopedia Archive Series is. So if you're familiar with the Split Enz band, started in 1974-75 in New Zealand, Tim Finn, Phil Judd were the main protagonists or songwriters, and then not long after, Neil Finn joined, Tim's brother, and they went on to have further albums and then broke up, and then Neil Finn became Crowded House. That's the arc. 50 years later, they're doing a reissue series, which will be 6 or 7 collections, if you like, of their entire catalogue that has been announced by Chrysalis, the original kind of release company for the band back in the day. And the first one of those that came out last year to time with the 1975 release of Mental Notes was this first volume in a box with booklets and 3 volumes of Mental Notes. It was called Split Enz Encyclopedia Volumes 1 and 2. There's a bit of contention as to why did you call it Volumes 1 and 2. Kind of makes no sense. There's 3 albums in here, and they are the original Mental Notes, the re-recorded Mental Notes, 4 songs re-recorded, additional songs added. In Australia and New Zealand it was called Second Thoughts, but the rest of the world it was called Mental Notes. Very confusing. And then an old kind of album called The Beginning of the Enz, which had a remaster on it. So that was the first kind of issue. There was a lot of comment about this because the CDs got 60% of the music was not on here, or no, 40% was not on here. So we only got 60% of the music. There was a lot of upheaval. Upheaval's not the right word. There was a lot of discussion in the forums going, why would you not put everything out on vinyl as well? On CD, they just got so much more. And almost as an afterthought, they went and released this year, a few weeks ago, the missing pieces that were on that release CD version. So they've released it on vinyl, and it's two albums. And in fact, they've called it Appendices. It's Volumes 1 and 2 Appendices, if you can see that. So what are they, and what is Mental Notes? So Mental Notes was the first debut album of the band Split Enz. It was prog rock. You can hear early Genesis, if you like that early Genesis prog rock. There's echoes in here of that, and then in fact you can hear Genesis then echoing back to this. This was a fantastic, incredible album that came out 1975. As I said, it was that classic prog rock of almost vaudevillian in sound, lots of different rhythms and instruments and percussion and piano forward music. But the most beautiful thing about this album is the songwriting. It is just stunning. It is one of my favorite albums. I've got several versions of it. This one is the New Zealand reissue from the same year in 1976. I've got a Australian original on Mushroom. I've got a 2020 remaster. They remastered it and did a remaster series of this in Dysrhythmia in 2020. Not a great copy. And then in 2025, they came back and they issued this Mental Notes. And what it was, or is, very interesting. So they included the original Mental Notes that was really only released in Australia and New Zealand, but they remastered it from the original tapes. And then included in this is the Second Thoughts album. So this was by, what happened was Phil Manzanera from Roxy Music had come to Australia, heard the album and said, come back over to London, I'll re-record it and we'll call it Second Thoughts. So they re-recorded 4 songs. They added a whole heap more and they released it as Mental Notes around the rest of the world. But because it had already been released in Australia and New Zealand as Mental Notes, they released it as Second Thoughts. So this particular reissue, this archival release, has Mental Notes, the original, remastered, has Second Thoughts, but Eddie Rayner, one of the original members, has got new stereo mixes on this Second Thoughts album. And then they've got Beginning of the Enz, which has got includes new stereo mixes on it from Eddie. And Beginning of the Enz is just kind of this weird little collection of early singles and rarities. And, you know, Spellbound on here, for example, has a different lead vocal, I think, of Tim Finn, whereas the original has Phil Judd on lead vocal. So it's just this kind of random little extra, really just for collectors. And then what they've done for the second issue, vinyl issue of this archival series, they've come along and they've created this, which is called Second Thoughts. I won't take it out of the shrink wrap because it's got this, which is really confusing. So, as I said, this has been put onto the CD of that first one, but they've released this as an afterthought. And what this is the original Second Thoughts produced by Phil Manzanera, and they've kept to those original mixes, but they've remastered it. So you've now got 1,000 different versions of this thing. And there's another album on here, which is this red one, which is quite fun, and it's called Wide Angle Enz. And it is a collection of kind of rarities and oddities, but live tracks, which I'm really excited about. So there's these bunch of tunes, which they must have recorded a beautiful kind of concert at Ormond Hall in 1975, because quite a few of them are from that gig. And my favourite song on this collection, this album, Mental Notes, is Time for a Change. And it was one of the 4 songs they re-recorded for Second Thoughts. So it's on all of these. I now have about 6 different versions of this song, remixes, remasters, etc. The live version of this is stunning. It's really great. Tim Finn's vocals are quite forward, and he changes the tune a little bit as he's singing compared to both the recordings. But it's the band sounds fantastic, and it's a really great live version of that. So also on this kind of random album is the 129 Titus, which is a stunning song, Under the Wheel, and a kind of a rare archival rough mix of a song called Matinee Idol, which was on Second Thoughts. Side 1 is Sweet Dreams, Late Last Night, another rough mix, and Stranger Than Fiction, Time for a Change, the Eddie Rayner remix. So a bunch of different songs on here. That Eddie Rayner remix, I have to say, at the end of side 1 on this oddity, I think is probably my favourite version of that song. I think he's done an amazing job of it. So the difference between the albums, just, you know, for those who are kind of following along here, When it was first released in Australia and New Zealand, it looked like that. It was a painting based on a photo that they'd done, painted by Phil Judd. I just took it out of the sleeve. So Phil Judd painted this. This was the original release of Mental Notes. Then when it was re-recorded in London and released internationally, by this stage, Phil Judd, who is this guy here, had shaved his head. And that's what it looks like there. And so when they released the box set last year, that's what the cover was, the bald head version, which is actually the international version. It's not the original. Famously on the original vinyl versions of Mental Notes, there's a locked groove of Phil Judd going, I think it's make a mental note, and it just goes on and on and on until you lift the stylus, which is a bit interesting, a bit fun. They were quite artistic. They were almost art schooly kind of vibe around their music, very prog, very, very progressive. Now, I just wanted to finish up. I said this would be short and I've gone on, but I just wanted to finish up what a friggin' disaster the packaging is. So both the box set, this is quite nice. This box is quite nice. But the actual albums, I've said this before, an absolute disaster, really thin card. No sleeve. Absolutely no sleeve whatsoever. The vinyl just slips out of it like that. Like a 7-inch single. Absolutely ridiculous. I was hoping that they would have heard the complaints for this second reissue, and no, they didn't. And they not only didn't hear, they made it worse. So the one that's just come out a couple of weeks ago is in this flimsy, thin as you can get piece of sleeve. They fitted 2 cardboard sleeves inside that sleeve, and again the album is just in there, just sitting in there. I'll put all of these into polyline sleeves, but really, really shoddy artwork and shoddy packaging, and like I just don't understand why they've go to so much effort to do a reissue series, and then just and it sounds really good. Like the music sounds fantastic, the remastering, the remixes, they're all really great. Why would you then just cut the costs with the packaging? Because this is for collectors. No one else is going to buy this, and you do this. It feels a bit money grabby for me, as opposed to a real lean in on the music. Anyway, that's my rave. I wanted to share that with you. If you're interested in the rest, I'm going to keep on doing the videos of the further ones that come out. I'll put them in a little playlist so you can see it all. And I'll see you in the next video. Bye.